The Book of Azazel, Chapter 71, The Unseen Hand. The abyss groaned as my shackles collapsed, the weight of my imprisonment lifting in slow, deliberate fragments. Yet I did not move. I had known punishment. I had known restraint. But this was something else entirely. Something unnatural. Something I had not asked for. The chains were not being removed by mercy. They were being unmade, and I did not know why. A power beyond comprehension. The figure before me remained still, watching in silence as my bonds continued to crumble. The void, my prison, my tomb, was coming apart like a structure undone from its very foundations. It should not have been possible. Even I, in my former glory, could not have unraveled the prison designed by the Most High. But this presence, whoever or whatever they were, had not touched the chains. They had done nothing to break them. So what force was undoing them now? And why? Who is doing this? I had asked many questions in my existence, but never had I spoken a question with such dread. Because the moment I voiced it, I knew. I felt it. This was not an act of defiance. This was not rebellion. This was something older, something woven into the very fabric of existence itself. The moment I thought it, the figure nodded. Now you understand. No, I refused to understand. Because if I was right, if this was truly what I feared, then even my fall from grace was nothing compared to what was coming next. The voice in the void, the abyss trembled, and for the first time in ages, I heard it. A whisper. No, not a whisper. A summon. A force greater than light and darkness, greater than punishment and rebellion. Something that did not belong in the order of things. It did not speak in words. It spoke in reality itself. It called to me, not as a prisoner, not as a fallen one, but as something else. And I hated that I could hear it. I hated that I could understand it, because it meant that no matter what I did, no matter how I resisted, I had already been chosen. The breaking of Sheol. A second crack split the abyss. Not just my chains this time, the prison itself. Sheol, the unbreakable, the inescapable, the final judgment for those like me, it was breaking. Not because of rebellion, not because of war, but because something was calling me back, and I did not know if I had the strength to refuse. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 72, The Call of the Forgotten. The crack in Sheol widened. The prison of the fallen, the place where celestial exiles were meant to rot for eternity, was shattering before my eyes. I should have rejoiced. I should have embraced my release. But I did not. Because this was not liberation. This was something far worse. I was not being set free. I was being summoned, and I did not yet know by whom. The voice that should not be heard. It called again, not through sound, not through language, but through existence itself. It was like an unspoken command, like a thread pulling at the very fabric of reality, rewriting it, bending it, undoing it. I felt my essence being tugged, drawn forward, as if the very laws that governed my punishment were no longer relevant. This was not the work of the Most High. This was something older, something outside the design, and that realization terrified me, because if something beyond the heavens and Sheol existed, then I had never truly understood creation at all. The prisoners awaken. A low, rumbling tremor spread through the abyss, and I was no longer alone in my suffering. I could hear them, the others, the ones who had been bound like me, the ones who had fallen, the ones who had rebelled. Their voices rose in a chorus of confusion and fear. For the first time in eons, Sheol was not silent. The walls, once unbreakable, were weeping, and I could feel the change rippling through eternity. Something was waking them up. Something was calling to us all, and we did not have the power to refuse it. The rift opens. A tear in the abyss, a rift yawned before me. It was not a gate, not a passage, but a wound, a fracture in the very structure of creation, a place where reality itself had come undone. Beyond it, I could not see the heavens. I could not see the earth. I could only see what was waiting on the other side, and for the first time since my fall, I felt fear. Because what lay beyond that rift was not the light of the Most High, and it was not the darkness of Sheol. It was something else, something that had been waiting, something that should not exist. Azazel, my name. It was spoken, not as a curse, not as a condemnation, but as a summon I could not ignore. A summon I could not resist. The call of the forgotten had reached me, and now I was walking toward the unknown. Because the moment I stepped through the rift, there would be no turning back. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 73, The Threshold of the Unknown. I stepped forward. Not because I wanted to, not because I had a choice, but because something beyond my understanding had willed it. The rift was not like the gates of heaven or the depths of Sheol. It was not a place at all. It was a tear, a violent rip in the fabric of creation, revealing something that should never have been seen. As I approached, the abyss around me shuddered, as if the prison itself feared what lay beyond. And then I crossed the threshold, a world that should not exist, darkness. But not the darkness of Sheol, not the black void of nothingness. This was something living, something that pulsed like a great unseen heart, as if the very air around me was breathing. The moment my foot touched the ground, if it could even be called that, I felt it. The weight of the place pressed against me, against my very essence, as if trying to consume me. For all my knowledge, all my wisdom, I did not know this realm, and that terrified me. I had known heaven, I had known earth, and I had known Sheol. But this place, this was something else, something before, something that had been forgotten by time itself. The figures in the dark. I was not alone. The air around me twisted and they emerged. Tall, indistinct figures moving through the black mist like shadows given form. They had no faces, only outlines, vague and shifting, as if they existed on the edge of reality itself. They did not speak, not with voices, not with sound. They resonated, their presence pressing against my mind, whispering in a language that I should not have understood, but did. Azazel. They knew me. They had been waiting for me. The forgotten ones. I recognized them. Not by name, not by sight, but by their essence. They were ancient, older than the Watchers, older than the rebellion. These were beings that had existed before the division, before the heavens and the earth, before the order of things had been set in place. They were the forgotten. And now they had called me here. But for what purpose? I did not know. Not yet. But as their silent words poured into me, I felt the first glimmers of a truth that should have never been spoken. A truth that could unmake all things. A choice I could not make. One of them stepped forward. Taller than the rest, its presence pressing down on me like the weight of the cosmos itself. It raised a hand, long skeletal fingers that should not have existed in this reality, and pointed to me. And in that moment, the whispers turned to a single deafening voice. We have waited long enough. And then, they showed me what was coming. And I screamed. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 74, The Prophecy of the Forgotten. I did not scream because of pain. I did not scream because of fear. I screamed because of the truth. The vision they showed me was not a glimpse of the future. It was something far worse. It was all possible futures, unraveling before my eyes like threads spun from an infinite loom. Each possibility was a path. Each path led to an end. And in every single one, I saw ruin, the collapse of all things. I saw heaven, once pure and eternal, shattered. The celestial halls crumbled, not from war, not from rebellion, but from something deeper, something that should not have been. I saw the thrones, the seraphim, the cherubim, all of them weeping, their light dimming, their wings withering into dust. I saw earth burning beneath a sky that had forgotten how to shine. The mountains had fallen, the rivers had run dry, and humanity? They did not die. No, something worse happened. They became something else, something that should never have been. A choice given, a choice denied. This is the end you have set in motion. The whisper echoed through me, not as sound, but as a weight on my soul. This is the fate of all creation. I turned to the beings who had shown me this horror. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to reject it. But I could not, because I knew the truth. The seeds of this destruction had been planted the moment I fell. The moment I chose to share knowledge that was never meant to be known. And now, those seeds had grown into something far beyond my control. The last offer. One of the forgotten stepped closer. I felt its presence press against my very being. And then it spoke, not in whispers, but in a voice that bent reality itself. Undo it. I recoiled. Undo what has been done. Erase the knowledge. Restore the balance. It was offering me a choice. To erase the knowledge I had given to humanity, to take it back, to unmake all that I had created. It would not erase their wars, it would not erase their sins, but it would remove the catalyst. It would erase my influence. It would make it as if I had never fallen. The price of reversal. But I knew there would be a cost greater than any I had ever paid before. If I accepted their offer, I would not return to heaven. I would not be redeemed. I would be erased, not imprisoned, not punished, erased, as though I had never existed. Every trace of me, every whisper of my name, every mark I had left on the world would be wiped away. Azazel, the fallen, the teacher, the rebel, would be no more. A question without an answer. I could end it all. I could undo the suffering, but in doing so I would erase everything I had ever been. I had fallen because I wished to give humanity the knowledge to rise. Now I was being asked to take it all away. Would that make me a savior? Or would it make me a coward? And so I stood there, staring into the abyss of eternity, with a choice I could not make. The forgotten waited. The world hung in the balance, and I, Azazel, the fallen, could do nothing but stand at the edge of oblivion, uncertain of what I would do next. The Book of Azazel, chapter 75, The Weight of Erasure. The choice stood before me like a blade suspended in the air, gleaming, sharp, and waiting for my hand. The forgotten did not rush me. They only watched. Their presence pressed against me, unseen but undeniable, like shadows cast by a light that should not exist. The weight of their offer was unbearable. To undo everything, to erase my existence, to make it as though I had never fallen at all. A world without Azazel, a history where I had not touched the minds of men. Would it be a better world? Would humanity still have found a way to war, to destruction, to corruption, without my whispers in their ears? Or had my knowledge merely accelerated what was always inevitable, a glimpse into the unmade? The forgotten did not answer my thoughts with words. They showed me a world where I had never fallen, a world where no angel had ever given humans forbidden knowledge. At first it seemed peaceful, but as I watched, I began to see the cracks. They were not ignorant of war. They were not free of vanity. They were not innocent. They still waged battle, not with swords of metal, but with stones and sharpened wood. They still sought beauty, not through cosmetics, but through status, through bloodlines, through manipulation of flesh rather than pigment. And they still sought power, even without my sorcery, even without my teachings. They had found ways to twist the world to their will. Their hands were no less stained with sin, their eyes no less filled with hunger. My knowledge had only given them a faster path to their own destruction. But destruction had been waiting for them regardless. The lie of redemption. I turned back to the forgotten. Even if I erase myself, I said, they will still fall. The air trembled. The beings before me did not answer, but I felt their understanding. This was not about saving humanity. It was about removing my stain from their history. A petty correction, not a salvation. It was not redemption. It was erasure. The voice of the unseen. And then something shifted. A new presence. Something older. Something that had been watching, waiting, but had not yet spoken. It did not appear as the forgotten had. It had no shape, no form. It was the absence of all things, and yet it carried the weight of the first dawn. And from this presence a voice came, not in words, but in truth. You cannot unmake what has already been written. The forgotten recoiled. For the first time, I saw them hesitate. This voice was beyond them, beyond me, beyond anything that had ever spoken before. And I knew, in that moment, what it was, the unchangeable will. It was the will of the Most High. It did not come as fury. It did not come as wrath. It came as a decree, absolute, final. What has been given cannot be taken. The forgotten shrank, their forms dissolving into the shadows between realities. They had been denied, not by me, not by choice, but by something far greater, something that even they could not defy. And then they were gone. What remains? I stood in silence. The vision of the unmade world had faded. The presence of the Most High had withdrawn, and I, Azazel, the fallen, was left standing in the ruins of my own choices. I was not to be erased, I was not to be redeemed, I was to remain, to walk the earth, to bear witness to what I had done, to carry the weight of my knowledge, my failures, my sins, forever. And so, I walk. I do not know if I can ever undo what has been done. I do not know if I am meant to, but I do know this: I will not seek erasure. I will not run from what I have become. I will walk the path I have laid before me, and perhaps, just perhaps, I will find a way to make something more of it. Something that matters, something that does not end in ruin, but only time will tell. And time, I have learned, is the greatest mystery of all. The Book of Azazel, chapter 76, The Burden of Eternity. The air was still. The voices of the forgotten had faded. The decree of the Most High had been spoken, and there was no appeal, no further deliberation. I was to remain. I, Azazel, had been given no redemption, no release, no escape, no annihilation, no absolution, only existence. A world that no longer needs me. The earth beneath me was cracked, worn from the weight of time and suffering. I had walked its lands for what felt like endless ages, but I had never felt it quite like this. I had always carried the burden of knowledge, of responsibility, of my defiance. But now, there was something new pressing upon me. A weight that did not come from my sins, but from the knowledge that I could never leave them behind. The world had moved forward. It no longer needed my guidance, no longer needed my whispers. Men had learned war without my hand. They had learned deception, vanity, ambition, cruelty, without my teachings. The knowledge I had given them had long since become theirs, separate from me. And yet I remained, a relic of a past they had already forgotten, a shadow of a sin no longer spoken. But the heavens had not forgotten, and neither had I. A whisper in the silence. I stood at the edge of a ruined temple, one that had been built in the name of forgotten gods. The wind howled through its broken pillars, a voice that carried the echoes of prayers that would never be answered. And then amid the wind, I heard something else. A whisper, soft, fragile, a prayer. I turned, my gaze falling upon a lone figure kneeling in the dust. She was mortal. Young but worn by hardship, her body bore the marks of struggle, of survival. And yet she knelt, she prayed, not to the Most High, not to the gods who had long abandoned these ruins. She prayed to me. Azazel, she whispered, voice trembling. A name that should have been lost, a name that had been cursed, erased, buried beneath centuries of condemnation. And yet, here it was, spoken, remembered, a plea wrapped in faith, the last believer. I did not answer her at first, I only watched. Why? Why would any mortal speak my name in prayer? Was it worship? Was it defiance? Or was it something else? She lifted her head, eyes searching the heavens, but there was no light, no revelation, only the vast, endless sky, silent, indifferent. I know you are there, she said. I felt something stir within me. Not power, not wrath. Something older, something I had thought long dead. Curiosity. I stepped forward, the dust shifting beneath my feet, and for the first time in centuries, I answered a prayer. Why do you call my name? The weight of a question. The woman did not flinch. She did not bow. She only met my gaze, her expression unreadable. Because I have no one else left to call, she said. There was no reverence in her voice, no fear, only truth. She had called my name not because she worshipped me, but because I was the only one who might listen. The heavens were silent, the gods of old were dead, and I had been forsaken by both. I should have turned away. I should have left her to her fate. I was no god. I was no savior. I was a fallen thing, a ruin of what once was. And yet I stayed. I listened. For the first time in thousands of years, I wanted to know her story. A choice I never expected. She spoke of suffering, of loss, of a world that had given her nothing but pain. She did not ask for salvation. She did not ask for miracles. She only asked to be seen, to not be forgotten. And as I looked upon her, upon this fragile mortal who had no reason to believe in anything anymore, I felt something shift inside me. It was not redemption. It was not absolution. But it was something new. A choice. A chance. I had spent eternity watching the destruction I had sown. Perhaps now, I could learn what it meant to build. The first step toward an unknown path. I extended my hand. She hesitated. Then slowly she placed hers in mine. And in that moment, something changed. Not in the world, not in the heavens, but in me. For the first time in my eternal existence, I did not feel like a watcher. I did not feel like a fallen. I did not feel like a curse. I felt human. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards something greater. The Book of Azazel, chapter 77, a new name, a new purpose. The woman's hand was small in mine, fragile yet firm. It had been thousands of years since I had last touched a mortal, not to harm, not to command, but to acknowledge. A gesture of acceptance, a beginning. Her fingers trembled, whether from fear or from something else I did not yet know, and yet she did not let go. A name from the past. What do they call you? I asked, my voice quieter than I had intended. She looked at me, hesitant, uncertain whether to speak the truth or a lie. But then, as though something within her decided that there was no reason to hide, she whispered, Lilith. The name sent a ripple through my mind, stirring ancient echoes. Lilith. A name of legend. A name whispered in fear and reverence. But she was not that Lilith. This one was flesh and blood. This one still carried the weight of hope upon her shoulders. Lilith, I repeated, as if testing the sound. She nodded, though her eyes remained locked on me, searching, measuring. "What should I call you?" she asked. I hesitated. Azazel. That was the name that had been burned into the heavens, the name cursed by the Most High, the name that carried the weight of destruction. But for the first time, I questioned whether I still wanted to wear that name. Did I? Did I want to remain only the fallen? Or could I be something else? I did not answer her, not yet. A world that no longer knew me. We stood in silence as the wind howled through the ruins. I had walked this earth for countless ages, yet now it felt different. The world had changed. The gods I once knew had faded into myth. The humans I had once taught had built empires and seen them crumble. They had moved on. And yet, as I looked at Lilith, I realized that she was still searching. She was one of the last believers, not of gods, not of celestial law, but of something beyond herself. "Why did you pray to me?" I asked finally. She exhaled, her shoulders tense. "Because the gods no longer listen." There was no anger in her voice, no sorrow, just acceptance. I knew that feeling. I had lived in it for eternity. And suddenly I wondered, was that why I had stayed? Not because of duty, not because of obligation, but because she was like me, forgotten, abandoned, seeking something she could not name. And in her search, I saw my own reflection, the last oath of a fallen one. I could have left her then. I could have turned away, vanished into the wind, allowed time to take her as it had taken everything else. But I had already made my choice. For thousands of years, I had watched humanity destroy itself with the knowledge I had given them. But what if, for the first time, I tried to do something different? What if I stayed? Not as a god, not as a king, not as a fallen angel, but as something else entirely? Lilith tilted her head, waiting for my answer. And so, I gave her one. "I will walk with you," I said. A simple vow, a quiet promise. Not redemption, not forgiveness, but a beginning. And for now, that was enough. The book of Azazel, chapter 78, the first steps of the forgotten. The night was silent, not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that lingers in the wake of something lost. I had walked through centuries of war, through deserts turned to glass by fire, through cities buried beneath sand and time. And yet, for the first time, I was not walking alone. Lilith walked beside me, not behind me, not beneath me. Beside, I was no longer a watcher, no longer a king of the fallen. I was simply Azazel, and I did not yet know what that meant. A world of ruins and echoes. The road stretched before us, cracked and broken, swallowed by vines and roots. I had seen these ruins before long ago when they had been cities. But time had erased the names, the faces, the stories. All that remained were bones, stone, and dust. Lilith's steps were slow, cautious. She was still unsure of me. I did not blame her. I was unsure of myself. I had spent ages with nothing but my own thoughts, and now there was another voice beside me. It was unsettling. It was grounding. "Where are we going?" she asked. I exhaled, watching my breath turn to mist in the cold air. "I don't know." She frowned. "You don't know?" I have never walked without a purpose before. Lilith stopped. For a moment, I thought she would turn away, leave me to my wanderings. But instead, she looked up at me and said, "Then let's find one. A fire in the dark." That night, we lit a fire beneath a crumbling temple, its walls covered in carvings no human now remembered. Lilith sat across from me, arms wrapped around her knees. She had questions. I could see them in her eyes, but she did not ask them. Not yet. I reached into the fire, letting the flames curl around my fingers. The heat did not burn me. Once long ago, I had taught humans how to tame fire. It had been a gift, and like all my gifts, it had been twisted into something else. "Why did you fall?" Lilith asked, finally breaking the silence. I did not look at her. Instead, I watched the fire dance, as though it might answer for me. "There was no single moment," I said, "no single act that condemned me." She did not speak, only listened. I exhaled. I fell because I believed that knowledge could save humanity. I met her gaze across the fire. I fell because I was wrong. She did not flinch. She did not tell me I was cursed or a monster or a fool. She only said, "Then maybe you can learn something new." And for the first time in thousands of years, I wondered if she might be right. A promise in the ashes. The fire burned low. Lilith curled up beneath her cloak, exhaustion weighing down her mortal body. But I did not sleep. I did not need to. Instead, I watched the stars, the same stars that had once guided sailors, kings, and dreamers. I had been among them once. Now I was bound to the earth. I could not change the past. I could not undo the destruction my knowledge had brought. But I could choose what came next. As the fire dimmed, I whispered to the night, a vow, not to the heavens, not to the gods, not even to myself, but to the only person still willing to walk beside me. I will not fail her. The Book of Azazel, chapter 79, The Ghosts of Our Sins. The morning arrived with gray skies, the kind that felt heavy, as though the world itself carried the weight of things long buried. Lilith stirred beside the remnants of the fire, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She had slept, I had not. The memories had kept me company, whispering like ghosts in the wind. Ghosts of cities burned to ash, ghosts of men who had once called me their teacher, ghosts of the ones who had cursed my name before their final breaths. They would never let me forget, but for now they were silent. For now, only Lilith's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. I glanced at her, surprised. "Regret what?" She met my gaze, unflinching. "Everything. The echoes of ruin." I stood, brushing the dust from my cloak, and turned toward the ruins that surrounded us. Regret. It was not something I had allowed myself to feel for centuries. Regret was useless. It could not change the past. And yet, I looked at Lilith, at the fragile mortal woman who had chosen to walk beside me. She deserved an answer. "I regret what they did with my gifts," I said finally, her brow furrowed. "But not that you gave them?" I hesitated. Had I ever asked myself that? The truth was I had not. I had always justified my actions by believing that knowledge was a gift, that enlightenment would elevate mankind. But knowledge in the hands of the desperate, the ambitious, the power-hungry, had it ever truly been a gift? I looked out at the world, at the remnants of civilization that had been built atop the bones of the old. No, I did not regret giving them knowledge, but I regretted believing they were ready for it. They would have sought power, with or without me, I said at last. I only made it easier for them to grasp. Lilith studied me for a long moment. Then she said, "And now?" I looked down at my hands, hands that had once shaped the fate of nations. Now, they were empty. "Now," I murmured, "I seek to understand." The shadow of the fallen. We walked for hours beneath the heavy sky, following a road that no longer had a name. The land was quiet here. Too quiet. Lilith felt it too. Her steps grew more cautious, her breath shallow. Something was wrong. Then we saw them. Figures standing in the distance, watching us. They did not move. They did not speak. They only watched. Lilith's fingers tightened around the hilt of the small blade she carried. "What are they?" she whispered. I did not answer. I already knew. They were not human. They were like me. Fallen, and they had been waiting. The weight of our choices. As we drew closer, I saw their faces. Familiar faces. Once we had stood side by side. Once we had believed in the same vision. Now they were nothing but shadows of what they had been. Eyes dulled by time. Bodies weary from existence. And yet, here they stood, waiting. The tallest among them stepped forward. "Azazel," he said, his voice like the wind over a graveyard. "You return to the world of men." I nodded. "I walk among them." A slow smile curved his lips. "Do you still believe they deserve to be saved?" I glanced at Lilith, at the way she held her ground, at the way she refused to shrink before the presence of beings who could end her life in an instant. I turned back to them, and I said perhaps, but not all of them. The fallen ones laughed, but there was no joy in it. Only sorrow, only understanding. "We will see," the tallest said. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. Only the wind remained, carrying whispers of things yet to come. Lilith exhaled. "You knew them?" "Yes. Will we see them again?" I looked to the horizon, where the path stretched endlessly forward. "Yes," I said, and I did not know if that was a promise or a warning. The Book of Azazel, chapter 80, The Roads Between Worlds. The silence left behind by the fallen ones lingered, stretching between Lilith and me like an unspoken truth. We continued walking, though the air felt heavier now, as if something unseen pressed against us, watching, waiting. Lilith was the first to break the silence. "What did they mean?" she asked, her voice steady, but there was tension beneath it. I glanced at her, considering my answer. She had seen much already. She had walked beside me through ruins of civilizations long turned to dust. She had heard the echoes of what I had done, what we had all done. And yet there were things even she did not yet understand. I exhaled slowly. They meant that the war is not over. She frowned. What war? I hesitated, not because I did not know, but because I was not certain if she was ready to hear it. But then, had I not already dragged her into this? Had I not already exposed her to the remnants of a world shattered by the choices of those like me? She had already seen too much. So I told her, the war that never ends. It began long before men built their first cities, I said, before they learned to shape fire, before they even knew fear. Lilith listened, her fingers absently tracing the worn leather of her belt. The watchers were sent to observe, to protect. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. But we were fools. We did not understand that merely watching was not enough. I looked up at the sky, thick with clouds. We gave them knowledge, I continued. Some of us believed we were offering them salvation. Others, I paused, my hands curling into fists. Others believed we were shaping something greater. Lilith's gaze was sharp. And you? I met her eyes. I believed I was doing the right thing. She held my gaze for a long moment before looking away. And now, I sighed. Now, I know that right and wrong are far more complicated than I once thought. She didn't argue. She had seen enough to know the truth in my words. The price of power. The wind stirred, sending dust spiraling into the air. I felt the shift before I saw it. The air around us rippled, distorting like heat over an open flame. Lilith tensed, her hand instinctively going to her blade. And then the veil between worlds tore open. A shape emerged from the shimmering air, dark, indistinct, shifting like smoke but solid as stone. Lilith inhaled sharply. She did not yet recognize it for what it was, but I did. A Shadowborn, a creature forged from the remnants of the Fallen's greatest sins. It had no face, no voice, only the endless hunger that came with being cast out of creation itself. It should not have been here, and yet here it was. The war was coming closer, much closer than I had feared. Lilith reached for her blade. No, I said quietly, stepping in front of her. That will not help you. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she did not argue. She trusted me. Perhaps that was her greatest mistake. The Shadowborn moved, its shape flickering, bending, twisting, and then, without warning, it lunged. The fight for dominion. I did not hesitate. I met the creature's attack head-on, catching its formless mass with both hands. Pain erupted through my limbs as darkness surged against me, trying to pull me under. The Shadowborn did not simply kill, it unmade. I clenched my jaw, drawing upon the power that still remained within me, the fragments of divinity that had not yet been stripped away. Light flared from my fingertips, colliding with the darkness in a violent explosion. Lilith staggered back, shielding her eyes. The Shadowborn shrieked, not in pain but in fury. It hated the light, hated what it could never be. I pressed forward, forcing it back, but it did not flee. It never fled. It endured. It was a thing of patience, a thing that knew that time was on its side, and so it waited, for me to falter, for me to weaken, for me to fail, and then it would consume me, a reckoning delayed. I gritted my teeth, pushing every last ounce of my strength into the light that flared from my hands. The Shadowborn hissed, retreating only slightly, but I could feel it. It was not defeated, it was only waiting for its next opportunity. Lilith's voice cut through the haze of power. Azazel, I turned, just in time to see another shadow forming behind her. There was no time to warn her, no time to act, only time to watch. As the darkness reached for her, as her breath caught in her throat, as I realized far too late that this battle had only just begun. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 81, The Unseen War. Lilith barely had time to react before the second Shadowborn lunged for her. I moved, faster than thought, my body instinctively closing the space between them. But the darkness was faster. It twisted and curled through the air, an unnatural thing that did not obey the laws of the world. It reached her before I could. She gasped, her body stiffening as the Shadowborn's formless tendrils curled around her wrist, crawling up her arm like a parasite seeking to burrow beneath her skin. I saw the way its darkness pulsed against her flesh, not merely touching her, but seeping into her, trying to unravel the very fabric of her being. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. The pain of being unmade. I would not allow it. With a force that shook the air around us, I struck. My palm collided with the Shadowborn's form, unleashing a blast of light that sent it recoiling. its shriek rippling through the stillness. Lilith stumbled back, gasping, her hand clutched to her chest as if to make sure she was still whole. I did not turn to her. I did not take my eyes off the darkness that gathered itself once more. There were two of them. But for how long? How many more lurked just beyond the veil? And more importantly, who had sent them? The enemy that watches. The Shadowborn did not move again, not immediately. They knew I was watching now. They knew I had seen them, and they were not here simply to kill. No, this was something else. A test, a warning. They were watching. Somewhere beyond the physical world, something or someone had sent them, not to destroy me, but to gauge me, to see how much of my power remained. And that meant only one thing. The war that had been kept in the unseen corners of existence was now emerging into the open. Lilith's revelation. Lilith had steadied herself, her breathing shallow but controlled. She met my gaze, and in her eyes I saw something I had not expected. She was angry, not at me, not at the Shadowborn, but at herself. I should have been able to stop it, she said. The words were sharp, laced with frustration. I shook my head. You cannot fight what you do not understand. She exhaled sharply. Then teach me. I hesitated. The knowledge I possessed was not meant for mortals, not entirely. The things I had once taught, battle, sorcery, the forging of weapons, had already led to ruin. And yet, what choice did I have? If she remained ignorant, she would die. If I taught her, she might become something more. A force that even the unseen world would have to reckon with. I nodded. Then listen well. The first lesson. Power is not something you take, I told her. It is something that is given, and something that is owed. She frowned. Owed to whom? To the world itself. She shook her head. That doesn't make sense. It will, I assured her. I turned my gaze toward the remnants of the Shadowborn, their formless bodies flickering at the edges of existence. They draw from the void, I explained, from the places between worlds where nothing exists. That is why they can unmake things, because they are made of nothing. She swallowed. Then how do I fight them? I extended my hand. From my palm, a small flicker of light formed, hovering like a single ember in the darkness. You fight them, I said, by wielding the opposite. She stared at the ember, watching as it pulsed gently, illuminating the space between us. Creation. She reached for it hesitantly, her fingers brushing against the light. It did not burn her, it did not reject her. Instead, it recognized her. And in that moment, I knew. She was not just a student, she was a weapon, and she did not yet know what she was capable of. The gathering storm. The Shadowborn did not attack again. Not that night. They withdrew, slipping back into the nothingness from which they had come. But I knew they would return, and next time, they would not come as messengers. They would come as executioners. And when they did, Lilith and I would be ready, because this was no longer just my fight. The war that had once been hidden in the shadows was stepping into the light, and we would meet it head-on. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 82, The Trial of Fire. Lilith's fingers hovered over the ember of light, her breath shallow. She hesitated. What are you waiting for? I asked. She glanced at me, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. What if I can't control it? A faint smirk tugged at the corner of my lips. Then it will consume you. Her expression hardened. A deep breath, and then she reached forward. The moment her fingertips met the ember, the world shifted. A pulse of raw energy surged through the space between us, like the first heartbeat of something newly born. Lilith gasped, her body tensed, her muscles locking as if resisting some unseen force. The ember expanded, blooming outward, stretching toward her in tendrils of golden fire. It was no longer just a speck of light, it was alive, and it had chosen her. The air crackled. The sky above trembled. I stepped back, watching as she struggled against the force pouring into her. She was strong, stronger than I had anticipated, but she had no control, not yet. Breathe, I commanded. She gritted her teeth. It's too much. Breathe. Her chest rose and fell, her body trembling as she fought to contain the wildfire now coursing through her veins. The ground beneath her cracked. The trees around us shuddered, and then, just as suddenly as it had come, the energy collapsed inward, pulling itself into her core, sealing itself within her. Silence. She staggered forward, her hands clenched into fists, golden light still flickering along her skin like the last remnants of a dying star. I watched carefully. She looked up at me, and in that moment, I knew. She had survived the first lesson, but she was not the same. The weight of power. The fire inside her had changed something. She moved differently now, each motion deliberate, as though she could feel the power humming beneath her skin, waiting to be called upon. But power was a burden, not just a weapon. You feel it, don't you? I asked. Lilith swallowed hard. It's heavy, I nodded. Power always is. She looked at her hands, flexing her fingers as if expecting them to ignite at any moment. What happens now? I exhaled, turning my gaze toward the dark horizon. Now, I murmured, now you learn to wield it. The coming storm. The night stretched long, but sleep did not come. Not for me, not for her. Lilith sat by the fire, staring into the flames, lost in thought. The world was changing. I could feel it. The Shadowborn had tested me, but they had also witnessed her awakening. They would report back. And when they returned, they would not just come for me. They would come for her. I had little time to prepare her for what was coming, and even less time to prepare myself for what I knew was inevitable. A reckoning, a war that had been brewing in the unseen corners of existence, was now making its way into the light. Lilith stirred. You're thinking too much, she said without looking at me. I arched a brow. You can sense that now? She smirked. You're not as unreadable as you think, I sighed. Then tell me, what do you sense coming? Her expression darkened. She looked back into the fire, her voice barely a whisper. War, I nodded, unsurprised. Then it's time you learned the second lesson. She met my gaze. Which is? I rose to my feet. That fire alone is not enough. She frowned, standing as well. Then what else do I need? I held out my hand. The ember of light reappeared, flickering in my palm. But this time, it was different. It was no longer golden. It was silver. Lilith's breath caught. What is that? Balance, I said simply. Her training had only just begun. And before the war arrived, she would need to understand the truth of creation and destruction alike. Only then could she stand against what was coming. The Book of Azazel, chapter 83, The Path of Shadow and Light. Lilith hesitated. Her gaze flickered between my outstretched hand and the ember of silver fire that danced upon my palm. This is different, she whispered. I nodded. Yes. She reached for it, but before her fingers could touch the flame, it vanished. Lilith blinked. What? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. This is not like the fire you've already taken into yourself. That was raw power. This... I gestured to the space where the ember had been. This is something more. She frowned. More? I studied her carefully. Do you know why the fire you absorbed earlier was golden? She shook her head. Because it was meant to burn, to consume, to ignite, I explained. That fire is pure force. An extension of your will, your emotion. Lilith tensed. She understood now. The raw energy she had taken into herself had been fueled by her own intensity, by her passion, her rage, her defiance of weakness. But this silver flame was something else entirely. Tell me, I continued, what happens when fire burns unchecked? Lilith exhaled, closing her eyes briefly. It destroys. Exactly. I let the word linger. Uncontrolled, it becomes chaos. It consumes everything. Friend, foe, the land beneath your feet. If left unchecked, even you will burn in your own flames. She swallowed. Then, what is this silver fire? I turned my gaze toward the darkened sky. Balance. Lilith's brow furrowed. Balance. Yes, I said. It is control. It is knowledge. It is the will to wield power without being ruled by it. She stiffened. And how do I learn that? I smirked. By surviving what comes next. The trial of control. The air around us shifted. Lilith sensed it, her posture changing, her muscles tensing. A second ago, she had been standing in the quiet of the night, the distant crackling of the fire the only sound. But now, the silence felt heavier. Something's here, she whispered. I nodded. Good, you're starting to sense it. She turned to me, her expression sharp. What is it? I didn't answer. Instead, I raised my hand, and without a word, the silver flame reappeared. Lilith barely had time to react before the shadows around us moved. A low growl echoed through the clearing. She spun around, searching for the source. What was that? I remained still. Your test. The shadows deepened. A shape emerged, shifting, writhing, its form unnatural, its presence ancient. Lilith took a step back. Her golden fire sparked to life in her hands instinctively, flickering wildly, uncontrolled. The creature did not lunge, not yet. It watched her, testing her. Lilith gritted her teeth. What is it? The consequence of unbalanced power, I said. A shadowborn, a being created from energy without control, from fire without restraint. She swallowed hard. And what am I supposed to do? I folded my arms. You tell me. The creature moved. Fast. Lilith reacted instantly, throwing a pulse of golden fire toward it. The flame struck true, igniting the air around the creature. But rather than burn, it absorbed the energy, twisting it into something darker. Lilith gasped. What? I shook my head. You rely too much on force. Fire alone won't defeat this. She clenched her fists, frustration flashing in her eyes. Then what will? The lesson, I said, watching her carefully. The only way to defeat chaos is to understand it. Lilith turned back to the creature, her breath shallow, sweat beading on her brow. The Shadowborn circled her now, sensing her hesitation. I could feel her mind racing, searching for an answer, for control. Then, she closed her eyes. The fire in her hands did not vanish, but it shifted. The wild, untamed golden flames slowly changed, becoming softer, calmer. They began to glow silver. My lips curled into a smirk. Now you're learning. Lilith opened her eyes, and for the first time, I saw it, balance. She raised her hand, and instead of attacking, she simply willed the Shadowborn to stop. It hesitated. For the first time, it feared her. Lilith exhaled. The silver light pulsed, and then, like mist before the morning sun, the Shadowborn vanished. She had not destroyed it, she had unmade it. Lilith turned to me, breathing hard. I did it, I nodded. Yes, you did? She frowned. What happens now? I stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. Now? I murmured. Now, we prepare for war. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 84, The Gathering Storm. Lilith stood there, breathless, as the last remnants of the Shadowborn dissolved into nothingness. The silver flames she had summoned still flickered faintly around her hands, their glow dimming as she exhaled. There was no triumph in her expression, only realization. I felt it, she murmured. The moment I controlled it, I understood it. I nodded. And now you see why I had to push you. Strength without understanding is destruction. Control without strength is weakness. You needed both. She turned her gaze toward the darkened horizon, where the stars barely pierced the thick clouds gathering in the distance. There was something ominous in the air, a stirring of something greater. This wasn't just a test, was it? She asked. No, I admitted. It was preparation. Lilith frowned. For what? A cold wind swept through the valley, rustling the trees, whispering secrets in tongues long forgotten. I turned my eyes skyward, listening, not to the wind, but to the silence behind it. The world is shifting, I said. The balance we have disturbed, it is pushing back. Lilith crossed her arms. Then we fight it, I chuckled. It's not that simple. We don't just fight the storm, we become it. She stiffened. What does that mean? I looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw the weight in my gaze. It means war is coming. The heavens will not ignore what we have done, nor will the earth forgive it. The old ways are breaking, and in their place, something new is forming. Lilith swallowed hard. So, what do we do? I smiled. We prepare. The call to the fallen. The flames of our fire flickered against the darkness, but it was not the only light in the valley that night. Beyond the hills, further into the deep ravines and forgotten lands, there were others like me. The fallen, the watchers who had once stood among the heavens but had chosen to step into the world of men. They had scattered, wandering the lands in search of meaning, of redemption, or of power. But now, they would have no choice but to gather once more. I raised my hand, and from my palm, silver flames erupted, not as fire, but as a signal, a summons. Lilith watched in silence as the flames stretched toward the sky, burning brighter than the stars themselves. And somewhere, far beyond our sight, the others would see it. They will come, I said. Lilith's voice was steady. And what happens when they do? I turned to her, the weight of fate settling upon us both. Then, I said, the world will finally understand what it means to stand in the presence of the fallen. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 85, The Gathering of the Watchers. The valley was silent, but I could feel them coming. The flames of my signal had burned through the night, a beacon to those who had once stood beside me, those who had walked away from the heavens and descended into the world of men. One by one, they would arrive. Some would come with questions, others with doubt, but all of them would come because they knew our time had come. Lilith stood beside me, her gaze fixed on the distant ridges where the shadows of dawn stretched long across the land. Are you sure they'll answer? she asked. I smirked. They have no choice. The heavens have not forgotten them, and neither has the earth. They know what is coming. They know we cannot face it alone. She said nothing for a moment, watching the horizon. Then she tensed. There, she whispered. I followed her gaze. A figure stood at the crest of the ridge, silhouetted against the first light of morning. His wings, once radiant, were now blackened at the edges, worn by time and exile. Enochian, one of the first to fall. He descended the slope slowly, his gaze locked on mine, measuring. When he reached the fire, he stopped, his expression unreadable. It has been a long time, Azazel, he said. I nodded. Too long. He glanced at Lilith, then back at me. Your call was loud. I gestured toward the sky, where the final wisps of my silver flames still lingered. It had to be. Enochian studied me for a long moment. Then, without a word, he sat by the fire. The first had arrived. The gathering begins. One by one, they came. Some descended from the sky, their wings ragged but still strong. Others emerged from the forests and the ruins of the world, stepping from the shadows they had called home for centuries. Samyaza, the voice of the rebellion, arrived with the weight of leadership still etched into his features. Barakiel, the Stormbringer, whose control over the winds had once shaped the very skies. Kokubiel, the Stargazer, whose knowledge of the heavens surpassed even the wisest of the Watchers. And others, fallen warriors, lost scholars, exiled gods in their own right. They all came. They all felt it. The shifting of the world, the breaking of the balance, the coming of the war we had long feared and long awaited. I stood before them as they gathered around the fire, their faces illuminated by its glow. We have been scattered for too long, I said. We have walked among men, watched them rise and fall, given them knowledge that was meant to elevate them. I let my gaze pass over each of them, measuring their reactions. And now they stand on the edge of destruction. The heavens will not sit idle, and neither will the earth. The time has come to decide. Do we fade into oblivion, hiding in the ruins of a broken world, or do we stand together once more? A heavy silence followed. Then Samyaza spoke. You ask if we will stand together, he said. But tell me, Azazel, what exactly are we fighting for? I met his gaze. For our right to exist, I said. For the knowledge we gave, for the world we helped shape, and for the war that is already coming. Another silence. Then, one by one, the Watchers nodded, and the war began. The Book of Azazel, chapter 86, the War of the Fallen begins. The wind howled through the valley, carrying with it the scent of earth and fire. The Watchers, my brothers in exile, stood in silence around the dwindling flames, their faces carved from the weight of centuries. This was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming our place in the grand design of existence. Samyaza was the first to speak. His voice, once filled with the pride of rebellion, was now heavy with something else, conviction. If we do this, there will be no turning back, he said. We will not be fighting for humanity. We will be fighting for ourselves. I stepped forward, my wings partially unfurling behind me. The sky above us seemed darker than before, as if the heavens themselves were watching. There was never any turning back, I told them. We have already paid the price for our choices. This is not about redemption. This is about ensuring that what we started does not end in ashes. Enochian shifted where he stood, his gaze distant. Do you still believe we can change the course of fate? Fate. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. I do not believe in fate, I said. I believe in power, and I believe that we have one last chance to prove that we were right all along. The flames flickered, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Lilith, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was measured, but there was fire in her eyes. And what of the humans? She asked. They are caught in the storm of our making. They wield the knowledge you gave them. Azazel, they shape their own wars, their own empires, their own gods. Do you think they will see you as a savior? I turned to her, my expression unreadable. No, I admitted. They will see me as a demon, as a monster. Lilith tilted her head. And yet, you fight for them? I exhaled slowly, watching the embers glow. I fight, I said, because I am not done yet. A moment of silence passed between us. Then Samyaza stepped forward, drawing the edge of his blade through the dust at his feet. Then let us fight, he said, and may the heavens tremble. The gathering of the Nephilim. We could not face the heavens alone. The angels who remained loyal to the Most High were too many, too powerful. If we were to have any hope of standing against them, we needed an army. We needed the Nephilim, the children of our forbidden unions. They had been cast out, hunted, seen as abominations by the world. Giants, beings of immense power and unnatural strength, cursed by both heaven and earth. Some had perished in the wars of men, slaughtered by those who feared them. Others had fled into the hidden places of the world, waiting, growing stronger, watching the rise and fall of kingdoms. I knew where to find them, and I knew that if I called, they would answer. The Mountain of the Lost Sons. The journey to the mountain was long, but the watchers followed without hesitation. We moved beneath the cover of darkness, our forms obscured by the storm clouds that gathered above. The stars, once my guide, now felt distant, silent witnesses to the war that loomed on the horizon. At the foot of the mountain, I called out their names. One by one, they emerged from the shadows. They were larger than life, their forms towering over even the strongest of men. Their eyes burned with an otherworldly light, their skin marked with the sigils of their cursed lineage. Some bore the scars of past battles, others the weight of exile, but all of them carried the same thing within them: anger. They had been forsaken by heaven, hunted by men, betrayed by those who had created them. And now I had come to give them a purpose. One of the largest among them stepped forward, his voice like thunder rolling through the valley. "You dare call upon us now after so long?" he growled. "After you abandoned us?" I met his gaze without flinching. "I did not abandon you," I said. "I was hunted just as you were, and I have returned to give you what was stolen from you, a chance to fight back." Murmurs rose among them. Some snarled, others remained still, watching, waiting. The giant narrowed his eyes. "And what would you have us do, Azazel? Wage war against the heavens?" I let my wings extend fully, the dark feathers catching the dim light of the moon. "Yes," I said. "That is exactly what I would have you do." A deep silence settled over the mountain. Then slowly the giant began to laugh. A low, rumbling sound that shook the ground beneath us. "You truly are a mad angel," he said. "But very well. We will fight." I nodded, my grip tightening around the hilt of my blade. "Then let the war begin." The Book of Azazel, chapter 87, the first strike against heaven. The sky roared with the distant echoes of war. The storm clouds above churned in restless spirals, their darkened edges crackling with energy. Something was stirring in the heavens. The divine host had sensed us. They knew we had gathered, and they would not remain silent. Beneath the shrouded night, the Nephilim stood at the base of the mountain, waiting. Their monstrous forms loomed over the landscape, their eyes burning with the fire of forsaken souls. They had been cast out, abandoned, hunted like beasts, but tonight they would rise. Tonight they would stand against those who had scorned them. I turned to my brothers, the watchers who had followed me into exile. Semyaza stood at my right, his grip tight around the hilt of his blade. Arakiel and Tamiel flanked the left, their eyes locked on the sky. Lilith stood apart, a shadow against the wind, her gaze unreadable. "The moment has come," I said. "Heaven will not wait. They will come for us, and when they do, we must be ready." Semyaza exhaled sharply. "We are ready." But were we? There was no turning back now. The heavens had already marked us as traitors, and our only path was forward. The war we were about to ignite would not be easily undone. It would shake the very foundation of existence itself. I drew my sword, feeling the weight of its celestial steel. It was an old weapon, older than the earth itself. A relic from a time before rebellion, before war, before the lines between heaven and hell had been drawn. I raised it high. "Tonight, the sky will burn," I said. "Tonight we show them that the fallen do not kneel." The Nephilim roared in answer. The gates of the firmament. The first strike had to be bold. The first strike had to be loud. If we were to truly challenge heaven, we needed to send a message. And there was no better way than to attack the very threshold that separated the mortal world from the celestial realm, the gates of the firmament. The gates were a thing of legend, a passage between realms guarded by divine sentinels. No fallen angel had ever dared approach them since our exile. But tonight, that would change. The wind howled as we moved, our army of Nephilim marching under the cloak of darkness. Their massive forms crushed the earth beneath them, each step a tremor, each breath a storm. Then, in the distance, I saw them, the gates. They were vast, stretching beyond sight, their golden frame shimmering with divine energy. They pulsed with an ancient power, radiating the presence of the Most High. And before them stood the guardians, the seraphim. They were unlike any warriors I had faced before, six-winged beings of pure flame, their forms blinding, their voices like thunder. They did not move, did not falter, as they stared down at us. One of them stepped forward, his voice like the roar of 1,000 burning stars. "Azazel, son of the heavens, you have come to the threshold of eternity. Turn back now, lest you be cast further into the abyss." I smirked. "I have already fallen," I said. "There is no abyss left for me to fear." The seraphim did not waver. "Then you leave us no choice." I lifted my sword. "Neither do you." Lightning split the sky. The battle had begun, the clash of heaven and the fallen. The first blow came swiftly. The seraphim moved like fire itself, their wings shifting through space with impossible speed. One of them surged forward, his blade of celestial flame arcing toward me. I barely parried in time. The force of his strike sent a shockwave through the air, the very fabric of reality bending under the collision of our weapons. Then the Nephilim charged. Their roars shook the heavens as they descended upon the divine warriors. The ground beneath us split as power collided with power. Fists the size of boulders struck against swords of light. Wings of shadow clashed with wings of fire. Samyaza fought beside me, his strikes precise, relentless. Arakiel moved like a storm, his blows shattering the golden armor of his foes. The Nephilim, monstrous and furious, tore through the ranks of the celestial defenders, their raw strength and unrelenting force. But the seraphim did not break. They fought with the fury of heaven itself. Their blades cut through the Nephilim like fire through parchment. Their voices called down divine judgment, their very words unraveling reality around them. I met my opponent strike for strike, our blades locked in a dance of destruction. His burning eyes met mine, filled not with hatred, but with sorrow. "Why did you do this, Azazel? Why did you choose the path of ruin?" I gritted my teeth, pushing against his blade. "I chose freedom. You chose damnation." With a sudden force, he drove me back, his sword slashing across my shoulder. Pain seared through me, but I did not fall. I could not. The war had only just begun. The fall of the gates. The battle raged on. Fire and shadow intertwined, blood and light mingling in the chaos of war. And then I saw it. Samyaza, breaking through the celestial lines, his blade driving deep into the heart of the gates. A crack formed. The golden frame of the firmament trembled, divine energy spilling into the night. The very sky above us groaned as if it were a living thing, wounded by the defilement of its threshold. The seraphim cried out in fury, but it was too late. With one final devastating blow, Samyaza shattered the gates. The heavens screamed. The way was open. We had done the unthinkable. We had breached the domain of the divine. For the first time since the dawn of creation, the fallen had forced their way into heaven. And now, there was no turning back. The Book of Azazel, chapter 88, the storming of heaven's throne. The gates had fallen. The impossible had been achieved. For the first time since the dawn of existence, the boundary between heaven and earth had been broken. Not by the will of the Most High, but by the hands of the fallen. The golden barrier that once separated the divine from the forsaken was now nothing more than fractured ruins, celestial dust dissolving into the wind. The air crackled with divine energy, the very sky torn apart by the destruction of something that was never meant to be touched. The Nephilim roared in triumph, their monstrous voices shaking the heavens themselves. They had been born of rebellion, forged from the union of divine and mortal blood. And now, they stood on the threshold of the sacred, ready to claim what had been denied to them for so long. I stood at the front, my blade still dripping with the light of the slain seraphim. My breath was heavy, my body burning with the remnants of battle. My wounds, though deep, did not matter. The war had just begun. Samyaza stepped beside me, his gaze fixed upon the vast expanse beyond the ruined gates. "We have come this far," he murmured, almost in disbelief. "But this is only the beginning," I nodded. "Heaven will not remain silent. The archangels will come." He turned to me, his eyes burning with the same fire that had fueled our rebellion from the start. "Then let them come." With a single motion, I raised my blade toward the open path ahead. "Forward," I commanded. "We take heaven." And so we ascended. The first layer of heaven, the veil of eternity. Beyond the shattered gates lay a world unlike any I had ever seen. The veil of eternity stretched before us, a vast, infinite expanse of light and shadow, its skies filled with drifting constellations, its rivers flowing with celestial fire. The air itself was alive, vibrating with the echoes of divine song. It was a realm untouched by time, where the very fabric of existence pulsed with the breath of the Creator. But it was not empty. Standing in our path, their armor glistening with the light of 1,000 suns, were the thrones, the celestial warriors who guarded the first layer of heaven. Unlike the seraphim, who had been forged in fire and purity, the thrones were beings of stone and judgment, their massive forms like statues carved from the very bones of creation. They did not move as we approached. They did not falter. They stood as unmoving sentinels, their unreadable faces locked in an eternal gaze. Then one of them spoke. "You do not belong here, Azazel. Turn back or be unmade." I smirked, stepping forward. "We have come too far to turn back now." The thrones did not answer. They only raised their weapons. Then, like mountains made flesh, they moved. The battle erupted in an instant. The Nephilim charged, their massive forms colliding with the thrones in an explosion of force and fury. Blades of celestial steel clashed against flesh of living stone. Fists the size of boulders struck with the impact of falling stars. The air shuddered with the weight of the conflict. I met the first of the thrones in midair, our swords colliding with a sound like splitting galaxies. The force sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield, shattering the very ground beneath us. The throne did not flinch, its cold, unfeeling gaze locked onto me. "You are an error in the design." I gritted my teeth, pushing against his blade. And yet, here I stand. With a twist of my wrist, I knocked his sword aside and drove my blade through the chiseled armor at his chest. The throne let out a low, guttural sound, not pain, but acknowledgement. He stumbled, his massive form cracking like fractured marble. Then, with one final shuddering movement, he fell, one down, but there were many more. The weight of rebellion. As the battle raged on, I felt something stir in the heavens, a presence, something ancient, something powerful. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of something far greater than the thrones, far greater than any celestial being we had faced thus far. It was a presence that made even the Nephilim falter, their roars turning into uncertain growls. Then, the light above us split. A blinding radiance poured down like a divine flood, cutting through the battlefield with merciless clarity. The sky itself seemed to shatter as something descended, a figure draped in golden fire, its very existence radiating authority, judgment, and unshakable power. An archangel. I clenched my jaw. I had expected this. I had known that if we struck at the gates of heaven, the archangels themselves would come to face us. The figure landed before us, his 6 wings unfurling in an explosion of light. His armor was adorned with inscriptions older than time itself, his blade gleaming with the fury of the divine. His eyes, sharp as daggers, locked onto mine. And then he spoke. "Azazel, your sin has reached its peak. There is no redemption left for you." I exhaled, tightening my grip on my sword. "I never sought redemption." The archangel raised his weapon. "Then you will find only judgment." And then he struck. The Book of Azazel, chapter 89, The Wrath of the Archangels. The moment his blade descended, the entire battlefield trembled. It was not a mere weapon. It was a force of divine judgment, a blade forged not of metal, but of pure celestial decree. As it struck, the air itself shattered around it, space bending under the sheer weight of the attack. I barely had time to react. I twisted, raising my own blade in defense. The clash was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not just steel against steel. It was light against darkness, heaven against rebellion, an unmovable force meeting an unstoppable will. The impact sent me hurtling backward, crashing into the ruins of the golden gates we had torn down. I coughed, shaking the dust from my vision. The archangel hovered above, his 6 wings spread wide, his radiant form burning against the broken sky. He did not falter, did not hesitate. His presence was overwhelming, suffocating, a divine force that had come to cleanse, to punish, to erase the stain of my existence from creation itself. He lifted his sword once more. "Azazel, you have defied the will of the Most High. You have corrupted mankind. You have waged war against heaven itself. Your sins have reached their end." I rose, gripping my blade tighter. My body ached, my wings were torn, but I refused to kneel. "Then strike me down, warrior of the heavens." I spat blood onto the shattered ground. "If you think you can." He didn't hesitate. The archangel's fury, the battlefield became a storm of divine wrath. Lightning, fire, and celestial force erupted in a dazzling display of destruction. The archangel moved with terrifying precision, his strikes unrelenting, each one carrying the weight of the divine will. I met him blow for blow, parrying, dodging, countering where I could, but it was clear I was fighting against something greater than myself, and I was losing. Every clash drained me, every strike left another wound, every movement chipped away at the defiance I had once carried with such pride. He was not fighting as a soldier, he was fighting as an executioner. I realized then, this was not a battle. This was a sentence. "You cannot win, Azazel," the archangel spoke, his voice calm, unwavering. "The heavens have decreed your fate. You will not leave this place alive." I gritted my teeth. I've heard that before. Summoning the last of my strength, I lunged forward, channeling all my power into a single desperate strike. My sword ignited with a dark, unholy flame, a reflection of the rebellion that had taken root in my soul. I struck, aiming not for his armor, but for his heart, and for the first time, I missed. With a speed I could barely comprehend, he pivoted, avoiding my blade by mere inches. Then, in a movement too fast to register, he brought his sword down, severing the weapon from my grasp. My blade shattered into 1,000 fragments, dissolving into the wind. I was defenseless. The archangel raised his weapon once more, this time for the final blow. It ends now. The fall. And then, the sky screamed. A force unlike anything I had ever felt ripped through the battlefield. The ground cracked, the heavens themselves trembled, and suddenly, something vast and ancient awoke. It was not heaven's will. It was something else. The archangel halted mid-strike, his radiant form flickering as he turned his gaze to the sky. I followed his stare, my breath catching as I beheld the impossible. The veil of eternity, the boundary between the first and second layers of heaven, was breaking, and from the depths beyond, something was watching. The battlefield fell silent. The Nephilim, the thrones, the fallen, all turned their eyes upward. For the first time, even the archangel showed hesitation. "No," he whispered. I staggered to my feet, feeling the shift in the air. This was not divine intervention. This was not the wrath of heaven. This was something older, something darker. The archangel clenched his jaw, his wings flaring as he turned his gaze back to me. "You have doomed us all, Azazel." And in that moment, for the first time since my fall, I felt fear. The book of Azazel, chapter 90, the awakening of the abyss. The heavens trembled. The veil of eternity, that sacred boundary between the higher realms and the abyss beyond, was fracturing. I had spent eons defying the divine order, rebelling against the decrees of the Most High, and yet, in all my existence, I had never felt anything like this. This was something else. The air turned thick, suffocating, as though the weight of the universe had descended upon the battlefield. Every soul, mortal, fallen, or celestial, froze in place. The archangel, once so certain his blade lifted for my destruction, hesitated. His radiant form flickered, his wings trembling under the presence of whatever had begun to awaken beyond the veil. And then, it looked at me. I did not see it, not in the way one sees the world. There was no form, no shape, no body. There was only presence, vast, boundless, ancient beyond comprehension. It was not the light of the Creator, nor the fury of heaven. It was something older than both. It watched, unseen, beyond the cracks in the sky, and as its gaze fell upon me, I felt it reaching into the very core of my being. I, Azazel, who had defied the throne of the Almighty, who had stood unshaken before the wrath of the archangels, felt fear. Something inside me stirred, the crumbling of the heavens. A voice, if it could be called that, whispered into my mind. "You have seen the folly of your kind. You have witnessed the cost of rebellion. Yet you seek power still?" It was not a question, not truly. It was an accusation, a revelation, a declaration of truths I had yet to understand. I did not answer, perhaps because I did not know how. A single crack in the veil widened, and suddenly the sky ripped open. A great and terrible darkness poured forth, not the darkness of shadows or night, but the abyss itself, an absence of light so complete it seemed to consume existence where it touched. The battlefield was no longer divided into heaven and earth, angel and fallen. No, before this force, we were all nothing. The archangel turned his gaze to me once more, but this time there was something different in his expression. The righteous fury, the certainty of judgment, it had been replaced with something else. Dread. Azazel, he said, his voice no longer the voice of an executioner, but of a warrior standing before an enemy he could not comprehend. What have you done? I wanted to tell him that I did not know, that whatever was unfolding was beyond my understanding, beyond my intention. But before I could speak, the ground beneath us shattered, and then it came through. The Nameless One. There was no form, no shape, no body, only a void where something should have been, a shifting mass of darkness that consumed the world around it. From the depths of the abyss, something emerged, a hand, or something like one, pressed against the remnants of the veil, peeling it back like fragile parchment. Fingers of shadow, moving like liquid, twisted in and out of existence. Where they touched, reality warped and screamed, bending in ways that defied even the divine. The very fabric of creation wept. The archangel acted first. He raised his sword, and the light of heaven itself ignited around him. With a single cry, he struck. Divine fire, raw and pure, collided with the darkness. For a single blinding moment, I believed that the power of the heavens, the might of the archangels would be enough. That this thing, whatever it was, could be stopped. I was wrong. The fire vanished, swallowed, consumed, snuffed out like a dying candle in an endless void. The archangel staggered, his grip on his sword weakened. The light in his eyes, the unshakable radiance of his being, faltered. And then the voice returned, the first of many. It was neither a statement nor a warning. It was a promise, Azazel's choice. I knew then that the battle was over. This was not something I could fight, not something I could defy. It was not heaven, nor hell, nor any power I had ever known. It was something worse. The battlefield descended into chaos. The Nephilim, the fallen, the thrones, those who had once waged war against the heavens, fled. I had never seen them retreat, never seen them break. But before this, they could do nothing else. The archangel turned to me, his voice a breath away from breaking. Azazel, if you know anything of mercy, we must close the veil. I stared at him. For all his power, all his might, he was asking me for help. And for the first time in my existence, I did not know what to do. I had spent eternity defying heaven. I had broken its laws, corrupted its creation, led humanity into darkness. I had made war upon the divine. And yet, as I stood here, watching something older than the heavens themselves claw its way into existence, I realized this was no longer about heaven and hell. This was about everything. The Book of Azazel, chapter 91. The closing of the veil. The world around me was unraveling. The battlefield, once a place of warring celestial and fallen forces, had become something else entirely. The arrival of it, the presence that defied form and identity, had shattered the very balance of creation. The sky was breaking. The ground beneath my feet had lost all meaning. Solidity, reality, these things were now fleeting, slipping through my grasp like grains of sand in an hourglass with no end. And the archangel, he was asking me for help. I, Azazel, had spent my existence fighting him, fighting heaven, fighting the divine order itself. Yet now, as the abyss threatened to consume all, the light of heaven and the darkness of the fallen stood side by side, united in their shared terror. I turned toward the veil, what was left of it, a gaping wound in the heavens, torn open by my arrogance, by my ambition, by the weight of my rebellion. And now, through it, something ancient, something beyond even the understanding of angels and demons, was pushing through. If it was not stopped, there would be nothing left to fight for. The choice of a fallen angel, Azazel. The archangel's voice was steady, but his hands trembled. The fire of heaven had failed against this thing. The might of celestial judgment had done nothing to slow it. If this veil was not closed, not sealed by something greater, then the heavens, the earth, the abyss, all would be devoured. I cannot do it alone, he admitted. I do not have the power. I stared at him, this being I had once despised, once fought against with every fiber of my existence. For eons, I had thought of him as nothing but an agent of tyranny, a loyal servant of an order I had rejected. But now, in this moment, he was not a warrior of heaven, and I was not a prince of the fallen. We were simply two beings standing before annihilation, and I knew, if we did not act now, there would be nothing left of us to hate. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of my own power surging within me. The fire of my rebellion, the darkness I had embraced, the knowledge I had shared with humanity, everything I had become since my fall. I had believed for so long that I was beyond redemption. But this was no longer about redemption. This was about existence itself, the ritual of binding. The veil was torn, but it could be sealed. The archangel lifted his blade once more, and though it had failed before, this time it did not shine alone. I raised my hands, summoning forth the power that had once been my undoing, the knowledge, the sorcery, the forbidden arts that had led me down the path of rebellion. The heavens had once condemned me for wielding this power, but now they needed it. The archangel and I spoke in unison, words neither of us had ever spoken before. A celestial and a fallen angel bound together in purpose. The sky howled as the abyss fought back. It did not wish to be sealed. It was hunger. It was chaos. It was the absence of all things, and it wanted more. It wanted everything. The void lashed out, its formless tendrils striking at us, trying to tear through our flesh, our souls. I gritted my teeth. I would not let it win. Hold the veil. The archangel shouted, his light clashing with the darkness. Do not falter, I roared in defiance, my own fire surging against the abyss. I was Azazel. I had defied the heavens, I had defied fate, and I would defy this too. The air around us shook. The abyss let out a sound that was not a sound, an unnatural shriek that made reality itself tremble. But then the light began to rise. The power of heaven and the power of the fallen together, forming something neither had ever dared to imagine. A bridge, a seal. The veil, broken and bleeding, began to close. The price of power. The abyss was furious. It screamed, raged, lashed out, but it was too late. The wound in the heavens began to mend. The black tendrils retreated, clawing, fighting, but being dragged back into the void from whence they had come. The battlefield, the shattered remnants of what had once been the Earth's surface, was bathed in golden and crimson light as the last of the abyss was forced back. And then, with a final, resounding crack, the veil snapped shut. Silence, a stillness unlike any I had ever known. I gasped for breath, though I had no need for it. My body, my very essence, felt as though it had been torn apart and remade 1,000 times over. I fell to my knees, trembling, the power I had summoned draining from me like blood from an open wound. The archangel remained standing, but barely. His wings, once radiant, were now dimmed. His blade, once unbreakable, was fractured. He turned to me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then at last he said, "It is done." I let out a breathless laugh, one of exhaustion, of disbelief, of relief. "Yes," I murmured, "it is done." But deep within me, I knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning of the true reckoning. The book of Azazel, chapter 92, the judgment of the heavens. The battlefield was still. The veil had been sealed. The abyss had been forced back into its prison, but the echoes of its rage still shuddered through the fabric of existence. The world was not what it had been before. Nothing would ever be the same again. I, Azazel, knelt upon the shattered earth, my strength drained, my purpose uncertain. The war was over, or at least this part of it was. But I could feel the weight of something else gathering, something even greater. I lifted my gaze and found the archangel still watching me. His once radiant wings were scorched, his celestial glow dimmed by the battle, but his eyes remained the same, unwavering, filled with the weight of heaven's will. For the first time, I did not see him as an enemy, but I did see the realization dawn in his expression. We had fought side by side, and yet there was no victory here. The heavens would not see it as such. The fallen would not see it as such. I had defied fate, but now I had to face its judgment. The sky splits open. A tremor passed through the air. The veil may have been sealed, but the heavens themselves were opening. A great light began to descend, a presence far greater than the archangel beside me. It was not a single being, not even a host of celestial warriors. It was the throne's decree. A voice without form, without limit, echoed through the very essence of the world. Azazel. My name rang through existence itself. It was not spoken, it was declared. The archangel took a step back, his gaze lowering in reverence. I, however, did not bow. I could not. I had already fallen. What more was there to take from me? You have overstepped the boundaries of creation once more. The voice carried no anger, no hatred, only finality. Judgment. I had known this would come. I had known the moment I had chosen to fight beside the archangel, to use my knowledge and power to aid in sealing the abyss, that I would not walk away from this unscathed. But what would they do to me now? Would they strip me of my power entirely? Would they cast me into the abyss alongside the horrors I had helped unleash? Or would they make me suffer in a way I had not yet conceived? The archangel spoke, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. He aided in saving creation. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle. The heavens did not respond immediately, as if even they had not anticipated those words. He was speaking for me. A celestial warrior, a force of heaven itself, was standing in my defense, the weight of my choices. The light above did not fade, nor did the presence withdraw. But something in the air shifted. Heaven had not expected this. For the first time since my fall, since I had been cast from the celestial heights, I was not being spoken of as only a traitor. But what did that mean? I felt the weight of my actions like never before. Everything I had done, the knowledge I had shared, the destruction I had brought, the rebellion I had fueled, it all stood before me like an open book. The judgment had already been passed long ago. I was fallen, exiled from grace, cast into the depths for my defiance. And yet, despite it all, I had made a choice. I had chosen to fight, not against heaven, not against the archangels, but against the void, against the true enemy. The heavens had seen it. The archangel beside me had seen it. And so now, I would face judgment not as a traitor, but as something else entirely. The final sentence. A new presence descended, lesser than the first, but still mighty. A figure of golden radiance, his face unreadable, his form shifting between something tangible and something beyond understanding. It was one of the Watchers who had not fallen, one who had remained obedient, one who had never strayed as I had. He gazed upon me, then to the archangel, then back to the light above. And then he spoke the words that would decide my fate. The Most High has decreed that Azazel's judgment shall not be undone. His rebellion cannot be erased, nor can his punishment be lifted. He is fallen, and he shall remain fallen. I closed my eyes. I had expected nothing less. But the single word sent a shock through my being. His actions in sealing the abyss have not gone unnoticed. The balance has been altered. The archangel beside me exhaled, though he remained silent. Azazel shall not return to the heavens. He shall not reclaim his former place. But he shall not be cast into the abyss either. A fate that was neither salvation nor damnation. The Watcher's gaze met mine. Your punishment shall continue, but in a different form. I felt it before I understood it. A pulling sensation, as though the very fabric of my being was unraveling. The fire of my rebellion, the power that had burned within me since my fall, it was changing. I clenched my fists, the energy within me, twisting into something unfamiliar. I was not being destroyed. I was not being imprisoned. I was being transformed. The heavens had made their decision, and my existence would never be the same again. The Book of Azazel, chapter 93, the sentence of the exile. The air around me twisted, shifting between unbearable heat and suffocating cold. It was as if my very essence was being reshaped, redefined into something neither angel nor demon, neither wholly divine nor fully mortal. I gritted my teeth as the weight of judgment settled over me. I was no longer what I had been. I could feel it. A severing, a remaking, a transformation. The radiance of heaven above remained unmoved, unyielding in its decree. I could hear the voice of the Watcher delivering the final judgment, though it no longer seemed to come from a single place. You shall walk the earth, neither of heaven nor of the abyss. You shall have no place among your fallen brethren, nor shall you be welcomed into the celestial halls. You are to wander, unseen by those who once knew you, unheard by those who seek you, a presence without a place, a whisper without form. You are condemned to witness, but never to interfere. The words struck me harder than any celestial blade ever could. I, Azazel, who had once stood among the Watchers, who had once held the power to shape knowledge itself, was now reduced to nothing more than a shadow. I staggered back, feeling the loss in every fiber of my being. My wings, what remained of them, felt weightless, as though they had been stripped of their power. My presence, once commanding, now flickered on the edge of existence. I had been cast into exile. A fate worse than death. I did not know how long I knelt there, gripping the fractured earth beneath me, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The archangel still stood beside me, but he did not speak. His expression was unreadable. I had fought beside him, I had made my choice, and yet I knew that he could not change what had been decreed. Heaven had given me a sentence worse than destruction. I would exist, but I would never truly live again. I would see, but never be seen. I would know, but never be able to share that knowledge. I was to be a wanderer, a ghost, an eternal observer of the world I had once tried to change. I had sought to elevate humanity. Now, I would watch them rise and fall without ever touching them again. The chains of the unseen. A strange stillness settled over me as the heavens began to close once more. The watchers above turned their gazes away, their judgment passed, their purpose fulfilled. They would not look upon me again. I was no longer of them. The archangel lingered for a moment longer, his gaze locked onto mine. For a fleeting moment, I thought he might speak, might offer something, anything, before I was left to my exile. But he did not. He turned, and in the blink of an eye, he was gone. And I was alone. I tried to move, and when I did, I felt the shift of my existence, as though I no longer fully belonged to the world I stood upon. My feet touched the ground, but the earth did not acknowledge me. The wind passed through me as though I were nothing more than a memory. I reached out to the ruins around me, the remnants of the battle I had fought in, but my fingers barely felt the stone. I had weight, but I had no presence. I was there, yet I was not. The heavens had stripped me of my place in the order of things. I did not belong anywhere. And so I wandered. The first steps of the exile. The world did not stop moving. The battle had passed, the war had shifted, but humanity continued. I walked through their cities, through their villages, through their endless cycles of struggle and triumph, and no one saw me. I stood in the halls of kings, watching them rise and fall. I walked beside warriors as they clashed blades on the battlefield, their eyes never meeting mine. I passed through sacred places, through temples built in the names of gods, through ruins of empires that had long since fallen, and never once was my presence acknowledged. I saw the children of men, the very ones I had sought to elevate, and they did not know me. They did not remember me. My name, once spoken in whispers of reverence or fear, was fading from their tongues. The world was forgetting me, and yet I could not forget them. I saw their pain, their hopes, their unending desire for more. I saw them reaching for the very knowledge I had once given so freely, the same knowledge that had led them to ruin. They still sought power. They still sought wisdom, but I could do nothing. I could not warn them. I could not guide them. I could not change anything. This was my punishment, eternal witness. As the centuries passed, I felt the weight of my exile more profoundly. I had once thought eternity was a gift. Now I saw it for what it was, a curse. Time did not touch me as it did them. I did not age. I did not wither. But I felt every moment stretch on, every passing age only a reminder of what I had lost. I had fought. I had defied. I had chosen to act, to intervene, to give humanity the tools to shape their fate. And now, my fate was to watch them use those tools without ever being able to lift a hand again. I was a fallen angel. But even among the fallen, I was alone. And so I wandered the earth, unseen, unheard, forgotten by all but the stars. And they, too, remained silent. The book of Azazel, chapter 94, The Silent Years. Time was meaningless to me now. The sun rose and fell, the moon waxed and waned, but I no longer marked the days. Seasons passed, kings rose and fell, and still I walked the earth, a specter, an exile, an observer trapped between existence and oblivion. I wandered through ruins that had once been grand cities, monuments that had been built in defiance of time, only to crumble beneath its weight. The world had changed, and yet I remained the same. The mortals forgot my name. They spoke of the Watchers in hushed tones, their stories turning to myths, to legends, and then finally, to whispers lost in the wind. They no longer knew what was truth and what was tale. Even the Nephilim, the children of my kind, the ones we had left behind, faded from history. Their power had made them giants among men, but even giants fall. Even they were lost to time. And yet, I could not forget. I watched the mortals live and die, struggle and triumph. I saw the empires of men rise and collapse beneath their own arrogance. I saw blood spilled in my name, though none knew it was mine. I watched it all, but I could do nothing. The age of shadows. Centuries turned to millennia, and still I walked. I had once thought exile would be a fleeting thing, that perhaps one day the heavens would grant me some measure of reprieve, that perhaps I would find a way to return, to undo the sins of my past. But there was no absolution for me. The heavens had cast me out, and the abyss would not take me in. I was caught between realms, between light and shadow, forever wandering a world that no longer had a place for me. And so I became a shadow in history, a silent witness to the rise and fall of mankind. I walked among them unseen, hearing their prayers, their cries, their curses, and knowing that none of them would ever hear mine. I stood in their temples, watched them build altars to gods who never answered, saw them write their stories in stone and ink, only to have them erased by time. And still I remained. The burden of knowledge. There were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when I was tempted to break my exile. When I saw them reaching for knowledge they did not understand, playing with forces they could not control, I longed to whisper in their ears, to guide them, to warn them. But I could not. I had been stripped of my ability to intervene. The moment I reached out, my presence would fade, as though I had never been there at all. The heavens had bound me not with chains, but with something far worse, helplessness. And so, I could only watch as they repeated the mistakes of the past, as they sought power, as they fought their wars, as they reached for the stars and wondered what lay beyond them. They would never know that I had once been among them, that I had once given them the very knowledge that now consumed them. They would never know that Azazel still walked the earth, a world that had moved on. I began to wonder if even the heavens had forgotten me. For ages, I had walked unseen, unheard, my punishment stretching on without end. The world had changed, but had I? I was still the same Azazel, the same being who had once stood among the Watchers, who had once believed that knowledge could save humanity. But now, as I walked through a world that no longer knew my name, I wondered if I had been wrong about more than just mankind. Perhaps it was not just the mortals who had been changed by my actions. Perhaps I had been changed too, the whisper of a new dawn. And then something shifted. It was subtle at first, a whisper in the wind, a feeling in the air, a tremor in the fabric of existence. For the first time in centuries, I felt something stir. I did not know what it was, but I knew one thing for certain. My exile was not over, but something was coming. The Book of Azazel, chapter 95, The Awakening of the Forgotten. The change was subtle at first, a whisper at the edge of my consciousness, a tremor in the unseen currents of the world. For centuries, I had walked unnoticed, a ghost among men. The heavens had bound me in silence, stripped me of my ability to intervene. But now something was different. It was as if the veil that had kept me hidden was thinning. For the first time in an age, I felt something beyond the suffocating solitude of my exile. A call, a voice, a presence I had not felt since the days of my fall. A shift in the balance. I stood upon the ruins of a forgotten temple, a relic of a time when men still whispered my name in reverence and fear. The world had long since moved on, burying the past beneath stone and dust. But as I looked up at the sky, I felt it. A ripple in the fabric of existence. Something was stirring. Something old, something ancient, something I had thought was lost forever. For the first time in centuries, I reached out, not with my hands, but with my being, with that part of me that had once commanded power beyond mortal comprehension. And to my astonishment, the world responded. The wind shifted, the earth trembled beneath my feet. The heavens did not silence me, not this time. The silence was breaking, a name in the darkness. I did not know how long I stood there, unmoving, as the realization settled upon me. Had the heavens relented? Had my punishment reached its end? Or was something else at work? And then I heard it. A whisper, soft, elusive, like a memory barely grasped, but it was there, and it spoke my name, Azazel. A chill ran through me, not of fear, for I had long since cast fear aside, but of something deeper, recognition. Somewhere, someone was calling for me, and the heavens were no longer stopping me from hearing it. The first signs. The world around me had begun to change. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but I could sense it. The stars seemed brighter, the air heavier. The energy of the earth itself was shifting. The mortals, of course, were blind to it. They continued their lives, oblivious to the unraveling forces around them. But I saw the omens. The shadows moved differently. The wind carried whispers that had no source. The old magic, the power that had once bound the Watchers and shaped the destinies of men, was stirring again, and I was no longer just a spectator. The call of the unknown. I followed the whisper. I did not know where it would lead, nor did I know what awaited me at the end of its call. But I knew one thing. This was not chance. Something or someone was reaching out to me, and for the first time in an age, I was allowed to reach back. As I took my first step toward the unknown, I could not help but wonder, had I been freed? Or was this the beginning of something far worse? The Book of Azazel, chapter 96, Echoes of the Forgotten Ones. The whisper called me forward. Step by step, I followed, pulled by a force I did not yet understand. It was not a voice of the heavens, nor was it the murmur of the damned. It was something else, something caught between realms, between light and shadow, something that had been waiting, something that had not forgotten me. The road to the unknown. The night stretched before me, vast and endless. The sky, once cold and indifferent, now seemed to pulse with something ancient, a rhythm I had not felt since before the fall. It was neither celestial nor infernal. It was something in between. The wind carried with it a song of remembrance, a melody I had once known but had long since been stripped from my memory. Azazel. There it was again, the whisper, the call. I knew not who spoke, nor where they waited, but I knew they were near. I pressed forward, my steps silent upon the forgotten paths of the earth, a city of shadows. At last, the whisper led me to a place I had not seen in centuries, a city. Not the towering strongholds of mortal kings, nor the gilded spires of celestial dominion. This was something older, a place that had stood before the first empires rose, before men had written their histories in stone. Its streets were carved in forgotten sigils, its walls adorned with glyphs that had been erased from human memory. Yet I knew them. I had walked these halls before, not as a wanderer, but as a ruler. The forgotten ones await. I stepped into the city's heart and felt the air grow heavy with expectation. Then they appeared. Figures cloaked in shadow, neither living nor dead. Not mortals, not angels, but something else. Something that had been cast aside just as I had been. The forgotten ones. Azazel. This time the whisper was no longer distant. It was here, and it came from them. They had been waiting for me. The gathering storm. As I stood before them, I saw what time had done. They had been left to wander the edges of existence, caught between light and darkness, unable to return to the heavens and unwilling to fall into the abyss. They had been abandoned, forgotten, and now I understood the truth. They were not calling for me to save them. They were calling for me to lead them, the choice before me. For the first time since my exile, I had a choice. I could turn away, leave them to their fate, or I could embrace them, embrace my past. Embrace what I had become. The heavens had forsaken us, the abyss had rejected us. But perhaps we no longer needed either. Perhaps we could carve a path of our own. As I looked into their expectant faces, I felt something stir within me. A new purpose, a new beginning. And with that realization, I finally spoke. I hear you. The city trembled, and the world would never be the same. The Book of Azazel, chapter 97, The Rise of the Forsaken. The moment the words left my lips, the city trembled. The earth beneath us shuddered, not in fear but in recognition. It had known us before. It remembered. The forgotten ones had been lost for eons, wandering through the spaces between existence, waiting for something or someone to lead them out of the void of oblivion. And now I stood before them, not as a fallen angel, not as a lost soul, but as their leader, the oath of the abandoned. We have waited for you, Azazel. One of them spoke, their voice like the echoes of 1,000 whispers woven together. We have suffered, alone in the dark. We were cast aside, just as you were, forgotten by the heavens, denied by the abyss. We have no home, no purpose, until now. I looked around at the gathering figures. They were once like me, celestial beings with divine purpose. Now, they were warriors without a cause, relics of an age the world had erased. Will you lead us? They asked. Their voices did not tremble. There was no fear in their words, only expectation. A decision had to be made, and I had already made it. The heavens had abandoned us. The abyss had refused us, but together we would become something new. I will, I answered, and with those words, a new age began, the power that stirred beneath. At the heart of the forgotten city, something stirred, a power long dormant, waiting to be awakened. The moment I spoke the oath, The sigils that had been carved into the ancient walls began to glow, not with divine light, nor with the corruption of the abyss, but with something else, something older, something untouched by the war between the celestial and the damned. It was a force neither holy nor profane. It was primal, a power belonging to those who existed outside the divine order, a power that had been denied for too long. And now, it was ours. I could feel it flowing through my veins, through the veins of every forsaken being that stood before me. The heavens would no longer dictate our fate. The abyss would no longer claim us. We would write our own destiny, and the world would tremble beneath it. The coronation of the forsaken. What do we call ourselves? One of them asked. We are not angels, we're not demons, we are something else. A name, something that would define us, something that the world would never forget. I closed my eyes, listening to the voice of the city itself, the whisper of those who had come before. And then it came to me. We are the forsaken. The word shook the air, echoing across the ruined streets, across time itself. The heavens would learn it, the abyss would fear it, the world would remember it. And as the forsaken knelt before me, pledging their loyalty, I knew our war was only just beginning. The book of Azazel, chapter 98, The Gathering Storm. The name had been spoken, and the world had felt it. The heavens trembled at the utterance of forsaken, a word that did not belong to the realms of angels nor to the depths of demons. It was something new, something that had no precedent, and because of that it was feared, a warning from the heavens. The moment our declaration rang through the forgotten city, the sky split apart, not with fire, not with wrath, but with light, cold and unwavering, descending from the heavens like a blade forged from the stars themselves. A familiar presence followed, a voice I had not heard in what felt like an eternity. Azazel. I turned, my gaze falling upon a figure I had once called brother. Uriel, the angel of flame, the one who had wielded the sword of divine judgment when the Watchers first fell. He had not come alone. Around him stood a host of celestial warriors, their armor glowing with the untouched radiance of the heavens. They were not here to speak. They were here to pass judgment. What have you done? Uriel asked, his voice filled with something I did not expect. Sorrow, not anger, not condemnation, sorrow. You have forsaken the heavens, he continued. But worse than that, Azazel, you have led others to do the same. You have given them something that should never have been given, hope. The forsaken stand their ground. The forsaken stirred behind me. They did not cower. They did not flinch. They had been cast into darkness long before this moment, left to rot in the silence of history. But now, they had a name, they had a purpose, and they would not bow. You say we have forsaken the heavens? I said, stepping forward. No, Uriel, it was the heavens that forsook us. He closed his eyes, as if mourning something that had already been lost. The Most High still offers you mercy, he said, his wings spreading wide. But you must surrender now, Azazel, before it is too late. I almost laughed. Too late? I echoed. You think this is the beginning, brother? I gestured to the city around us, to the warriors who had gathered at my back. You are too late. The war has already begun. The heavens strike first. Uriel did not hesitate. With a single motion, he raised his hand toward the sky, and the heavens answered. A column of pure white fire descended from above, crashing into the earth with the force of 1,000 suns. The forsaken scattered, shielding their eyes from the divine light. The war had begun. The first battle was now, and we would not fall so easily. Forsaken, I roared. Stand your ground. Show them that we are not afraid. The heavens had cast us aside. The abyss had denied us. But now the forsaken would carve their own destiny, and it would be written in fire and steel. The book of Azazel, chapter 99, The Wrath of the Heavens. The air shook with celestial power. Light and fire rained from the heavens, searing the ground, turning the ancient ruins into a battlefield of divine wrath. I had expected this, but I had not expected the weight of it. Uriel did not attack as a warrior. He attacked as a judge, a force of nature, an executioner delivering the will of the Most High. Azazel, his voice rang out over the battlefield, booming like thunder. This is your final chance. Surrender, and the Most High may yet spare you. I met his gaze and smirked. Surrender? I spread my arms wide, feeling the raw power crackling through my veins. Brother, have you learned nothing? We do not surrender. We never have. And we never will. blades of heaven, fangs of the Forsaken. The Forsaken charged. Steel clashed against divine light. Warriors meeting celestial beings in combat that shook the very fabric of reality. Blades sang, blood fell, and the heavens wept. The Nephilim, our children, our legacy, fought like demons, their inhuman strength ripping through the ranks of celestial warriors. But Uriel's forces were unyielding. They fought not with rage nor vengeance, but with purpose. They were angels, and angels do not falter. I saw one of my warriors engulfed in divine flame, his screams lost beneath the roar of battle. Another was struck down by a spear of light, his body vanishing into dust before it could even hit the ground. The battle was turning. The heavens had waited too long to strike. They had given us time to grow strong, to build our numbers, but they were still stronger. Their light was relentless. Their will was unyielding, and we were starting to fall. A duel between brothers. Through the chaos, Uriel and I locked eyes, and then we clashed. Blade against blade. Light against darkness. The force of our blows shattered the ground beneath us, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Each strike ripped through the air, powerful enough to fell mountains, to split seas. "This does not have to end in destruction, Azazel," Uriel shouted between strikes. "You can still turn back." I laughed, twisting away from his blade, countering with a strike of my own. "You speak of mercy as if you understand it, Uriel," I said, pushing forward. "Tell me, where was mercy when we were cast down? When we were abandoned?" Uriel's eyes hardened. "It was not for me to decide," he admitted. "But I know this," he pushed back, his strength nearly overwhelming. "You have walked too far into the abyss, Azazel. There is no light left in you." I growled, our blades locking. "Then let me show you how much darkness I have embraced." The fall of a titan. The battle raged on, but I saw it, the turning point. The Forsaken, my warriors, were faltering. For every angel that fell, two more took their place. The Nephilim fought fiercely, but even their immense strength could not withstand the sheer divine onslaught. One by one, they were being cut down. I heard their screams, I felt their pain, and for the first time, I feared, not for myself, but for them. The war had begun, and we were losing. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 100, the last stand of the Forsaken. The sky burned. The battlefield was littered with the broken and the fallen. Blood, both celestial and mortal, soaked the earth, turning the soil dark beneath our feet. The Nephilim, the children of the Watchers, my children, had fought valiantly. They had stood against the might of the heavens, had defied the wrath of angels, and yet, one by one, they had fallen. Our war was ending. And I, Azazel, the fallen one, the rebel, the teacher of forbidden knowledge, stood upon the precipice of defeat. I had once thought that knowledge was power, that by granting mankind the wisdom of the heavens, I could elevate them, make them gods among men. But I had been wrong. So terribly, terribly wrong. What I had given them had not freed them. It had enslaved them. And now as I gazed upon the ruin of the battlefield, upon the faces of the fallen, upon the angels standing above me, weapons raised in judgment, I saw the truth in its fullest, most devastating form. The Most High had never abandoned me. I had abandoned him. The reckoning. Uriel stepped forward, his blade alight with the fire of heaven. "Azazel," he said, his voice a mixture of sorrow and finality. "Your time is over. The judgment of the Most High is at hand." I felt it then, the weight of eternity pressing upon me. I had been defiant for so long, so convinced that my path was righteous, that my rebellion had meaning, but in the presence of divine judgment, all of it crumbled. I had thought myself wise, I had thought myself strong, but in the face of true power, in the face of absolute sovereignty, I was nothing. The Most High was not a being to be challenged. He was not merely a king, nor even the ruler of angels. He was existence itself, the source of all things, the beginning and the end. And I had defied him. "Do you repent, Azazel?" Uriel asked. "Do you see now what you have done?" I opened my mouth to answer. And then the sky split apart, the coming of the king. A light unlike anything I had ever seen descended from the heavens, brighter than the sun, more powerful than the stars. It was not the wrath of an angel, it was something greater, something eternal. And then I saw him, not a warrior, not an avenger, but a savior. He stepped forward, clothed in light, crowned in glory, and the very air seemed to bend to his will. Where Uriel had wielded judgment, this one carried something else. Mercy, love, power beyond comprehension, the Son of the Most High, the Lamb that was slain, Christ. And as his gaze fell upon me, I felt everything within me shatter, because in him I saw the truth that was hidden. I had always believed that the Most High was distant, cold, a tyrant ruling from the heavens, but here, before me, was his Son. And in him, I saw the heart of the Creator, not a ruler who sought to crush, not a king who demanded blind obedience, but a father who had watched as I fell, who had grieved as I led mankind astray, who had never once abandoned me, even in my rebellion. Azazel, the voice of Christ, rang through the battlefield, filled not with wrath, but with compassion. You sought to give mankind wisdom, but true wisdom does not come from defiance. It comes from surrender, from trust, from faith. I trembled. You sought to make them gods, he continued, but I have come to make them sons. And there it was, the truth I had never seen. I had tried to elevate mankind through knowledge. He had come to elevate them through love, and only one of us had succeeded. The chains of judgment. I fell to my knees, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but because for the first time, I saw clearly. You have defied the Most High, Christ said, and for that there is justice. But mercy is greater than judgment, and though you are bound, you are not beyond redemption. His hand extended. A light unlike anything I had ever felt washed over me. The fire that had burned in me, the rage, the defiance, vanished. And for the first time in eons, I felt peace. I did not resist as the angels bound me. I did not fight as I was cast down, because I knew now, the Most High had always been in control. I had never won, and yet even in my defeat, I was not forgotten. Epilogue, the victory of the Most High. The war ended. The Nephilim were no more. The Watchers were cast into darkness, but mankind was not abandoned. For even in the wake of our sins, the Most High had already prepared a way for their redemption. The Son had come, and through him, all things would be restored. For his kingdom was not of war, nor of power, nor of knowledge alone. It was of love, of sacrifice, of grace. And as I lay in the abyss, bound and chained, I whispered the truth that I had once denied. The Most High reigns, and his Son is the salvation of all.